like to introduce you to Dr. Valerie O'Brien, who is Assistant Professor of Medicinal Chemistry and Molecular Pharmacology at Purdue University in Indiana. Welcome, Valerie.
Hello, thank you for having me today.
So, can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your current role?
So, as you mentioned, I am an assistant professor at Purdue University in the College of Pharmacy. When I was looking for universities to start my independent lab, I was really drawn to Purdue and to the notion of working in a college of pharmacy because at the end of the day, what we want to do is cure stomach cancer. And so, what better way to do that than to be surrounded by some of the best pharmacy and pharmaceutical researchers in the country? I am a relatively new assistant professor. I've been here for about 3 years. And in my day-to-day, what I'm doing is running the lab. I have a lot of great people in the lab, 3 graduate students, a postdoctoral researcher, and then some technicians who help keep everything going. And we are asking questions about stomach cancer, about how and why people get stomach cancer and what can we do about it. Also, in my role here at Purdue, I do some teaching, and specifically, I teach immunology to pre-pharmacy students. And so far, it's been fantastic. I love the work that we're doing. I'm excited to get up every day and come to work and ask these really important questions about stomach cancer.
So, what's the main focus of your gastric cancer research today?
My background is actually in microbiology. So my PhD was in microbiology and I studied bacterial infection. And that's what got me interested in stomach cancer because most stomach cancer is caused by bacterial infection of the stomach by a bug called Helicobacter pylori. But what's so fascinating about Helicobacter pylori is that half the world has this infection, but we don't see half the world getting stomach cancer. Most people with the infection have no symptoms. They're never going to go on and develop the disease. So what we're working on in the lab is trying to understand how and why specifically this infection leads to cancer so that we can better identify who are the at-risk people, who are the people who need early detection, screening, so we can try to catch cancer before it even begins. Or hopefully in the future, we could give a targeted therapy to prevent cancer from developing. That's the crux of what's going on in the lab, trying to assess why most infected people are fine and some infected people unfortunately go on and develop stomach cancer.
What originally drew you to stomach cancer? It's a, as you know, it is not a high profile cancer. But it does seem that those who are in the field were specifically drawn to it for a reason. So what is it that drew you to stomach cancer research?
Well, I would have to say it's this bug, which I have here. This was crocheted for me by a former lab mate when I was doing my postdoc. This bug, Helicobacter pylori, we call it that helico because it's helical in shape, like a curly fry, and it lives in the stomach. And it's very happy in the stomach. The stomach is a pretty harsh environment. Most bugs cannot live there, but this bug is super specialized and it's able to thrive in the stomach. And this bug is found in the stomach of half of the world. And for most people, they're fine. But actually, in some very unfortunate people, this bug, over the course of decades of living in the stomach, causing inflammation, causing damage, that leads to cancer development. So that's what really drew me to stomach cancer. These questions about how and why this bug, it seems so cute, right? This little helical shape, but actually this is in the wrong environment, and unfortunately in some very unlucky cases, this little bug leads to cancer development. And it's a highly fatal cancer. It's a terrible cancer. It's a terrible disease. So because I had training as a microbiologist, somebody who understands bacteria and who kind of thinks like a bug, I thought I could use that knowledge in microbiology and apply it to cancer. So cancer is a disease that has touched my life, it touches everybody's life. And I thought, what can I do? How can I contribute to cancer while using my microbiology skills? And so stomach cancer is really the perfect disease to do that because so many stomach cancers are caused by that bacterial infection.
What a wonderful illustration. It reminds me a little bit. I interviewed a number of women for International Women's Day. One of them was Sarah Lonardi, who is a surgeon in Italy. And she dug out from her parents' home a book that a science book from when she was 10 years old, where she had drawn the abdominal area and marked all the areas of the stomach. And that's what she's doing today. And your bug reminded me a little bit of an amazing illustration of passion very early on in your career, obviously very early on in her life. So you received the 2018 DDF-AACR Gastric Cancer Research Fellowship Grant. What specific research did that support?
The 2018 grant that I got from Debbie Stream Foundation was a grant that helped support my postdoctoral research. So I, at that time, was working in Seattle at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center in the lab of Dr. Nina Salama, who is a worldwide expert in Helicobacter pylori, the bug that causes stomach cancer. And I joined the lab as a postdoctoral researcher. So I had my doctorate in microbiology, but I was now going to switch to stomach cancer and try to learn more about this disease, get training in it, and start to do independent research. And I was very fortunate that we had some very exciting early data about a new mouse model that we felt was potentially more clinically relevant than some of the existing models that were out there. So when it comes to cancer research, often we're looking for ways to model the disease in the lab setting, because if we have a model, then we can use that model to ask, why is cancer developing and what drugs might we be able to use that could prevent that cancer or could reverse the damage. So I had some very exciting data that suggested that we had a really good model. And then I was so fortunate to get funding from Debbie Stream Foundation. That funding supported me in the early days of the project. That was so helpful to give me some runway to pursue that model, to get that project off the ground. And it turns out we do think it's a really good model. We were able to publish several peer-reviewed publications with the findings that we had in the model. And ultimately, I discovered a new stomach cell type in these mice that we think is associated with Helicobacter pylori-driven inflammation and precancerous changes in the stomach. So because I had this funding from DDF that allowed me to generate this data, I then turned that into additional research funding, including from the National Cancer Institute, and then was able to use that to launch my independent lab here at Purdue University. And now I have multiple people in the lab all working full-time on stomach cancer. So that 1 year of funding from Debbie Stream Foundation really got the ball rolling. I like to say it was like a snowball rolling down a mountain. Started off small, just 1 year of funding to support me, but then by the bottom, it's an avalanche. And that is why I just can't express enough gratitude to DDF for that funding. It really has launched my lab here where we're asking these important questions about stomach cancer every day.
It's interesting. So I'm brand new to this area, come out of the finance industry. And there's an interesting analogy in the finance industry that I think, as I've talked to researchers, I think it's very similar. And that is when you're starting a fund, an investment fund, those early days of trying to get funding is very, very difficult. You're only looking for a small amount of money, and yet it feels like, it's really tough. But that small amount of funding gives you the opportunity to say, someone's funded me, I'm credible, and it allows you to build a track record that then opens up additional larger grants that can be helpful. Everything that I'm hearing about the research sector, it's very similar. You have to build a track record. You need people to think that you're credible. In your world, you have to publish, and you need something to publish. It does sound like that, DDF was helpful in that in taking a chance on you, right? In those early days.
You're absolutely right. And also with science, in order to push projects forward, you need data to show that it's going to work. But in order to generate data, it costs money. You have to pay people, you have to buy the supplies, you have to pay to do the analyses. And so having that funding from DDF, that seed funding was able to, we used that to push the project forward. Then we were able to get essentially like investors, right, from other funding agencies, from the National Institutes of Health, and then parlayed that into opening my independent lab, where now I have multiple people working full time on stomach cancer. So that's exactly right how it is between, the finance world and the research world.
Yeah, it's all about money, right? At the end of the day, unfortunately, it's not all about money. It's about skill set as well, but and passion. But I think, unfortunately, money is important. One of the things I'd like to do at DDF is to really find ways to connect research with more funding sources. So we'll see how all that goes. So you talked about the early support that you got, and you talked about now building your own lab. Um, Talk a little bit about how your work from those days has evolved.
With the initial money that I got from Debbie's Dream Foundation, I was working to develop and characterize a mouse model. And we were successful in doing that. But now that I have my own lab, I'm really trying to branch out and to go beyond. So I was able to use that mouse model to discover a new cell type in the stomach that we hadn't recognized before. Then, of course, we needed to know, is this relevant to human disease? So we started looking in human samples, and we do see it there. And now we're working to understand, is this a cell type that we could drug? Could we drug these cells to prevent cancer from developing? So now that I've come to Purdue, I've been working to expand the directions that we're going in the lab. We do still use that model because it's very helpful, but we're also doing more things with just cells in a petri dish. We're doing mini stomachs, little sort of stomach-like organs that you can grow in the lab and see how they respond to different cancer drugs. We're getting human samples from our clinical collaborators, our wonderful collaborators down at Indiana University School of Medicine. And then an excellent strength of Purdue is that we have an outstanding vet school here. And I have an excellent collaborator over in the vet school, and have been getting samples from companion animals like cats and dogs, and we're seeing how their stomachs compare, because especially dogs can get stomach cancer too, and we can learn a lot about human stomach cancer by analyzing what's happening in the dog stomach and how is it similar or different from human stomach.
Really fascinating. And I love this idea of kind of breaking down silos between different disciplines. As you said, who would have thought that you're learning from, the veterinary school? Well, actually, very similar cells are in those, animals, and there are very similar examples. So I love the fact that I think in the cancer space in particular, and I'm hearing it all around the stomach cancer world, that collaboration and crossing over different roles, different disciplines, is happening more and more. And it does seem to be contributing to the acceleration of research outcomes and hopefully getting us to the journey for a cure or some kind of preventative treatment, that means we don't have to deal with this deadly disease. So I love that. I love the story of working collaboratively with other groups and learning from them.
Absolutely. It's a very difficult disease. If this were easy, we would have solved this problem already, right? So I think one researcher is not going to be able to do this alone. We really have to collaborate and work closely with researchers in other disciplines. Everybody can bring something to the table, and then we can use all that knowledge to try to make a positive impact in stomach cancer.
So what are you most excited about in your current research?
I would say the thing that excites me the most about what we're doing is now that we're a few years in, we've had the lab for a few years, we have started getting some exciting data about some possible drug targets, things that when we target them in our different models in cells, it seems to potentially prevent cancer progression. So really excited to push that work forward. And we also have an exciting project looking at additional risk factors that make somebody more likely to develop stomach cancer, and we're getting some exciting data there. So I feel like every day I'm so excited to wake up and come into lab and see what data did everybody generate yesterday, what's going on, how can we push this project forward, that project forward, because we're starting to learn lots of interesting things at this moment. We also have potentially identified a gene in Helicobacter pylori that is contributing to the disease state. So we're excited to see if we can target that gene. That experiment is happening today, actually, when I get off this call. So
Oh, fantastic. Well, very exciting. And it's interesting because so let me ask you, do you have any interaction directly with patients at this point, or is it largely lab work that you're focused on?
at this point in my career, because Purdue does not have a medical school, unfortunately, I'm not directly engaging with patients. But I am always keeping patients at the center of my mind. Everything that we do is for the patients and for their families and friends. And that is something that really is the North Star for our research. So although we're not directly engaging with patients on a day-to-day basis, that's what motivates everything that we do. We're very lucky to have some outstanding clinical collaborators at Indiana University School of Medicine. And so we are able to get samples from patients in the state of Indiana. And we're so grateful to the people who agreed to provide us samples. That really is an incredible way to help push the research forward. And so in that regard, we are interfacing with patients, and we are really appreciative to them.
Yeah, in some ways I feel badly because you've done the work that actually leads up to the treatments that are given to patients, and of course the patients are thanking those that are giving them the treatments, whereas actually the patients should be thanking you for all of the work and the winding road to get there. But so I, and I know, that patients who are listening to this will be really reassured that you are working diligently on their behalf. They may not see you. You may be, behind the scenes, but actually it's incredibly important work.
Well, the patients just have to focus on getting through their treatment and doing what's best for them. So to any patient out there, I would say, if you're watching this, thank you so much. Stay strong. We're all rooting for you. And we are working as hard as we can every day here, trying to address these questions about how and why stomach cancer develops and what can we do about it. So we are keeping you in mind, and we are just wishing the best for every stomach cancer patient in the US and in the world. We would love nothing more than to be out of a job, basically.
Well, I'm sure there'll be something else to move on to. There are plenty of issues in the world, right? But we are so grateful that you're focused on stomach cancer. We're grateful for that bug that gave you the bug for stomach cancer.
That's right.
Um, so, what gives you hope about the future of gastric cancer research?
I think this is a very exciting time to be doing gastric cancer research. I think that people are really making exciting discoveries all the time. We are in an era where scientific technology has advanced really rapidly. So things that used to be impossible to even consider back when I was in grade school, now you can do in a day. We can take cells in a dish, we can take cancer cells and treat them with a drug, and within a week we can know every single gene that turned on or off, and a detailed characterization of exactly how these cells are responding. So it's a very exciting time because we've unlocked all kinds of possibilities for learning about how cells respond. And now people are using these to identify potential new treatments. There's new treatment modalities that are coming in. People are doing really interesting work looking at how to harness your own immune system to kill cancer. So I think this is a time when people are making discoveries left and right, and it's so exciting, but the challenge is also just staying up to date with everything that's going on so that we can make sure that we're really at the cutting edge.
Fantastic. Well, listen, this has been fantastic, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and the ways that you're collaborating with others. We really appreciate it, really appreciate your time. Thanks, Valerie.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. To anybody who's watching, thank you so much. Thank you to Debbie Stream Foundation for everything that you do for stomach cancer research. And I'm here to say that the researchers who are working on this disease are really passionate. We're giving it our all, and we are trying to find new treatments, new early detection, and cures for stomach cancer.